I am back, y'all. I took several weeks off, but I am back and ready to do weekly uploads again. So let's start off with codependency. When is being close to someone too close? Codependency has been a buzzword in the media for a little while now, and so let's break it all down and get a real understanding of what codependency actually means. If you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button and let's get into it. Let's start off with the definition of codependency so that we know what we're talking about, and then we'll go into some examples. Codependency can be defined as any relationship in which typically two people become so invested and enmeshed with each other that they can't function independently. You're probably thinking that sounds really extreme, but codependency shows up a lot in ways that we might not even realize. Let's talk about what it looks like. So picture this. You're in a relationship and you find that you're doing most of the giving. You have a really hard time with separation and you find it to be anxiety provoking. You might notice that you enable behavior or patterns that your partner exhibits. And enabling is typically shown by ignoring the problem, accepting excuses all the time, and always being the one to try and fix the problem. In this relationship, you also might notice that you're caretaking a lot of the time. You notice that your partner's mood has an extreme impact on your mood and your ability to carry out day-to-day activities. And although again that seems extreme, that can be like, my partner didn't text me back, I can't function at work, I'm having too much anxiety, my partner is upset with me, I can't go hang out with my friends because I'm too anxious about it, my partner is in a bad mood, I need to fix it before things will be okay for both of us. In this relationship, you also notice that you have difficulty setting boundaries, and with that comes resentment at times. So let's talk about where codependency comes from. And one of the sources is, you guessed it, your childhood. Oftentimes when children experience their needs being ignored or not being met, sometimes when you do get those needs met, you cling on to that person. So if you go back to the example that I used of the relationship, both sides of that relationship are codependent. One person is the extreme giver, the other is the extreme taker. I really like to look at independence like a spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum we have hyper-independence, and I did a video on that, so I'll tag that. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have codependency. In the middle, we have healthy independence. So hyper-independence is that drive to need no one, where you don't rely on anybody at all. Codependence is that unhealthy reliance. And healthy independence is about being able to understand for yourself when you need to enlist support and when you're able to do things on your own, and creating a balance between the two. So going back to where does this all stem from, if we think about a child whose needs have been neglected, on one end of the spectrum, a child might respond and be hyper-independent where they just don't ask anybody to meet their needs. On the other end of the spectrum, the child might develop into someone who clings on to anybody who's able to meet their needs in a way that is unhealthy. What's interesting though is that hyper-independent people often find themselves in codependent relationships. And you're probably like, how does that even make sense if hyper-independent people don't want to rely on anybody? That is the key. It makes them a perfect candidate for the giver in a relationship that's codependent. However, typically those relationships can be draining and lack a lot of reciprocal emotional intimacy. When we're in codependent relationships, we remove the autonomy of the other person. And what I mean by that is that we automatically assume that the other person can't deal with adversity or disappointment. We don't give them the chance to. We might assume that that person might not be able to meet our needs, but have we asked them? Have we inquired about that? So moving forward, how do you establish individuality and independence within this relationship? Start small. I always say start small with everything, because oftentimes when we try to make massive leaping changes, they feel too uncomfortable, too big, and then it scares us away. One of my favorite strategies, especially in relationships, is talking about the problem. Stay with me. If you have a conversation that you want to bring up and it's feeling really scary, it's feeling really intimate to you, you're not really sure what to say, talking about the conversation itself before getting into the content of the conversation can be really helpful. So that might look like, hey, you know what, I saw this YouTube video about codependency and I really want to talk about what that might look like in our relationship. Or hey, I've been learning a lot about codependency and I really want to have a conversation about how that might impact the two of us. It allows for a soft startup and for both parties to feel a little bit prepared going into that conversation, especially knowing it might be vulnerable. Get clear on your needs. Your needs are valid regardless of what they are. It's just understanding who needs to meet that need. That could be you, that could be an intimate relationship, that could be a friend, a coworker, a family member. The reason why we have so many different relationships is because they all meet different needs for us. but establishing who is the most appropriate person to meet this need can help us have healthier relationships. And then within the relationship, focusing on mutual reliance. So how are we both getting our needs met? How can we ensure that? How can we check in on that? And practicing coping tools first and foremost when you notice that anxiety start to come up about your relationship or separation. Try to increase the time between feeling the anxiety and reaching out to your partner or other person. If you have any questions, drop them down below. I will try and answer all of them. If you have any suggestions for content, drop that down below as well. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.